All right, now let me kick off by introducing our wonderful panel. I think it's going to be a really good conversation, and let me invite them up to the stage. First up, we have Christiane Corbett, who's a senior researcher from the American Association of University Women, AAUW. Hi, how are you? Next up, we have Bita Correa, who's the program coordinator at Fundeac. And finally, but not least, we have Christine Schindler, who's the founder of Girls Engineering Change, a CGIU commitment holder, and an awesome STAR panel member. All right, let's part of the reason why they asked me to moderate is, I spend a lot of my time. So I work for President Obama, but my involvement with CGI allows me to say that I've, working for two presidents who really care passionately about this topic. And I work in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is really focused on how do we make sure that we're preparing our young people for jobs and industries of the future. Can you guys hear me now? All right. I usually just project, so I forget the mic part. So part of the reason why the president focuses on it, both President Clinton and President Obama, is this really important idea that we are motivated in the world to solve the big challenges. And part of the reason why we wanted to do this panel was this idea that science and technology can be a really powerful way to make the world a different place. We saw two different commitments to action where students were using science and technology, developing new apps, teaching math as a way to do it. We've got some real doers on this panel who can really help elaborate about how, when you're on your campus and you're thinking about how do we address the grand challenges when it comes to the fact that the world is going to have 9 billion people, how do we work on agriculture, how do we work on the fight over water, how do we work on addressing the immense challenges of global climate change, what are ways that you can actually use the talents you're picking up in taking science, technology, engineering courses to actually make the world a different place. So let me, start with Christine, because there's two parts which I think are really powerful about your story. One is that you're actually a student that's interested in pursuing a STEM degree. And if you could talk about how you became interested in wanting to be, interested in engineering. But then two, you also saw the potential to give back into the community and actually inspire the next generation of girls. So if you want to talk about both this idea that you think you can make the world a better place through the things you learn in school, but there's also this idea of community give back.
Absolutely. So I guess that I really became interested in engineering when I was a junior in high school. My parents were really supportive in encouraging me to go into a STEM field because they saw my aptitude for those subjects. But I didn't really understand what engineering was. I just thought it was building bridges or building cars because that's the stereotypes that generally surround this field. And then it wasn't until I got to college and was enrolled at Duke University that I started really understanding that engineering is going to be the field that solves so many of the challenges that are facing our world. I took an introduction to global health class during my first semester along with some of my intro to engineering courses and really saw the need in some of the developing world countries to have engineers going and tackling the problems that exist here. And so kind of tying your two questions together, once I started seeing this need, I realized that I had no idea in high school that engineering was going to be so important in making a difference in the world. And I think that's something that would have drawn me so much more to the field of engineering. I think something that a lot of females are really drawn to is and students in general is the idea to make an impact in the world and to really make a difference. And so when I found out that engineering was the way to do this, and I also noticed the disparities in my classes and how few females were there, I started thinking of ways I could tie these two projects together. And I was involved in the Engineering World Health Club at my school, which worked to design medical devices that could be used and implemented in developing world hospitals. And that's how I started thinking, how could I put these two areas that I'm interested in together? And so what my program does now, Girls Engineering Change, is brings girls in the communities to local colleges and they work in the lab settings. And there they're able to assemble low-cost medical devices that can be sent for training in developing world hospitals. And so in that way, they can actually see how they can make a difference through engineering. And I guess the two main challenges that I see in this is that so many female students and also students in general when they don't go into engineering, they don't see that the problems they face are lack of encouragement and lack of understanding. And so I think my program especially is used to tackle that is by bringing mentors that can overcome the lack of encouragement and have the girls actually assemble something that's tangible, that can be used to make an impact, and in that way overcome the lack of understanding.
That's great. So why don't we I think that's a great jumping off point. I think the leadership that AUW has really shown in this, Christy. I think the Why So Few report both talks about the challenges we're working on, but I think, the work that you all have done about, not making science and technology feel like the what versus the how as a way to address these challenges actually has a really important impact when we're trying to inspire girls and others towards this. If you want to talk a little bit about some of the things you found, but then also ways we can work on it.
Sure. Right. So from AAUW's research, what we know is that one of the most effective ways that we can use science and technology engineering to promote the social good is to attract more women to these fields, more girls and women. And part of that is because polls show that women and girls say that they're more motivated by the social relevance of their work than boys and men. And so more of them do. There are also boys and men, like probably all of you here in the room today, who are also really motivated by the social relevance of your work. But girls tend to be even more so. And so that's one reason. And at the same time, there's not a real a clear idea in our culture in general that scientists and engineers do socially relevant work. Like what Christina was saying, it's great that she was able to make that connection, but many people don't. Many girls in particular don't make the connection between getting an engineering degree and making a difference in the world. And so that's one of the biggest things that we can do to really make the most of our scientific and technological and engineering knowledge to help the world, is to get more girls into these fields. And in Why So Few, we talk about a couple of the barriers that do still exist. One of them is just this stereotype that boys are just better at math and science than girls. And there's a lot of research that shows that this stereotype has harmful effects on girls in terms of their performance and their interest in pursuing a career in this area. And so what we can do, it even affects their self-assessment. So girls with the same past mathematical achievements and test scores actually assess their abilities lower than boys do. And at the same time, they hold themselves to a higher standard in those fields. And this is research that came out of Dr. Shelley Carell at Stanford University. She did this study and showed very clearly that girls, when they don't assess their abilities at the same level that boys do, even though they have the same past math grades and test scores, and then when they also believe that they have to do better than the boys believe they have to do to really think they're good at it, that can help us understand why fewer girls and women aspire to these things, not because they can't do it, but because they don't think that they can do it. So one thing that has been shown to be really helpful in terms of protecting girls against the effects of these stereotypes is a growth mindset. And what that means is a belief that you can actually get smarter and learn the things you need to know when you challenge yourself. So this is really interesting work. Also, this is by Carol Dweck at Stanford University, and she shows that some people have a fixed mindset, and that means they're born with, they believe that they're born with a certain amount of intelligence. And then there are people who have a growth mindset, and they believe that the more they challenge themselves, the smarter they get. And so the thing that matters about this is that people with the growth mindset are more likely to persist in the face of challenges, whereas those with a fixed mindset are more apt to say, well, I guess I've reached sort of the end of my abilities and I should go do something else. And that's particularly relevant for girls in science and engineering because there aren't that many women for them to look at and say, this is somebody who, I could do what she's doing. So so a growth mindset, and one way that you encourage, that Dr. Dweck's research shows that you encourage this growth mindset is to embrace the struggle of solving a hard problem, because chances are, many of you probably have done just fine throughout school, doing well even in the workforce, but at some point, if you're going to solve a really, really difficult problem, you're probably going to find it difficult. You're going to come to a wall where you think, wow, I don't know what to do here. And if you have a growth mindset, you're more apt to persist and to think, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but other people didn't know what they were doing. When Thomas Edison, discovered electricity, he didn't know what he was doing all the way along. There's some saying about, on the 10,000th try, he finally got electricity. So, this kind of belief that you have to try, fail, not a big deal to fail, that you learn from that. That's what a growth mindset can do. So embracing that struggle and really recognizing the power of the effort as opposed to the quick success.
That's great. And one way I've heard the growth mindset described, which really crystallized it for me, was, if you are learning to read and you're like struggling, nobody says, well, I'm a bad reader, I guess I'm just not good at reading, I'm going to stop. Everybody, your parents, everybody else says, hey, keep working at it. You're not allowed to stop at being a bad reader. But a lot of times in math and science, you say, oh, I'm struggling at math, just not for me. And we socially accept that, whereas we wouldn't let a student say, oh, well, I'm struggling with reading, I should just quit. I could do other things with life other than reading. So I think this is a really important concept. Vita, I think one of the things that's really powerful, and I think President Clinton talked about it in the opening plenary, is, we face these immense global challenges. We have a rapid world population that's growing. We have issues around urban and rural, about empowering farmers, about using technology to make sure that we're doing sustainable agriculture, water use. I think a lot of these questions, part of the thing that I think is so powerful about this idea of students tackling grand challenges is there are so many high quality problems out there. You know what I mean? Which is, if you actually go into various communities, you can actually see we need to be doing things at much lower cost, in much more sustainable ways, and in much more community empowered ways. How are the ways that you guys think, when you think about kind of your rural education program and actually building an integrative, sustainable way of teaching it, how do you guys sort of think about the role of science, the role that education can play, and the role that students, some of the students in this room are from the United States, some of them are from universities around the country. How are they, if they wanted to come and start to tackle some of these, what are the ways that they do it in a way that actually builds community empowerment?
Okay, that's kind of a tough question to answer, but I'll try a little bit. Really, the program or the NGO that I work with has developed a curriculum over the last 40 years with this idea that, what we really want is to see development. We want to see development in these communities globally around the world. But that in order for that development to come about, you really need people to be in charge of their own development. You need people to be protagonists of their own development, and not something to think that now this is something that's going to come from outside, or that it's going to be imposed, or that it's sort of just going to be the solution that arrives. So the NGO that I work for, as I was saying, has developed this curriculum, and the idea with it is that it's really education for development, that you need education to be able to bring about this development. But that, and there's a quote that we use that says that, that man is like a mine rich in gems, and that only education can really sort of develop those gems. So you really need this education to sort of bring out that potential in everybody. And so the idea of math and science is that it's not math and science only as sort of vocational training or math and science is something that you do like on a something that you just learn, or an equation, but really math and science sort of as knowledge, and as that knowledge that is part of humanity and part of the heritage that humanity has. So somehow people have to have that access to that knowledge. And then really, if you believe in the potential of others, and you believe that they can actually find the solutions to all of these problems, then if you give them this access to knowledge, not to information, but to knowledge, then they will also really be able to tackle those problems themselves, because we can't think that now we're going to find a solution and that, you know, these bright young minds just in one part of the world are going to sort of solve all of the problems of the world and that's it. But that really it requires participation from everybody, and participation for people to change their own environment. So really in that way, you know, math and science are conceived in this very broad manner.
Great. So I think one question, you know, especially because we've got all these great students here, you guys are advocates in your own communities, on your campus, trying to figure out how to organize your time, what to work on, what to recruit your students on, what clubs to start, what, you know, I'm curious, Christine, when you're trying to recruit your fellow classmates and say, hey, you know, there are new problems worth solving, this is the way to do it, or how do you sort of think about being a mobilizer on your own campus?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that a lot of the efforts behind mobilizing campuses and getting students more engaged come from partnerships and come from hearing more about what other students are doing. I think that a lot of the empowerment that exists comes from, you know, conferences like this, or even just conversations sitting around a dorm room hearing about, hey, what that student is doing is really cool. If they're doing something like that, why can't I do something like that? And I think we heard a lot about the pay it forward kind of from our commitment makers, and I think that that is really key. I think that I had a lot of people in my life who were, you know, giving me support, even just, for example, through the Clinton Global Initiative university program. I mean, you all know what midterms weeks can be like, and my midterms week a few months ago, I got a letter in the mail from President Clinton just congratulating me and thanking me for my work. And, you know, stuff like that really resonates with you and really pushes you to keep going, especially when, you know, you have 4 engineering tests hanging over you and they're going to be really difficult. And I think that we then can do that too. We can pay it forward. And that's kind of the idea, is then, you know, that reminds you to go out and do something else, to empower someone else, to go and, you know, motivate some middle school girls or elementary school girls, or motivate someone in whatever way your passions fit. And so I think that all kind of ties together, and it's about, you know, passing it on and really realizing that in so many different ways we can all make an impact in the world, but it's just using your aptitudes and your talents to empower yourself and then use that to empower others.
That's great. So I think this pay it forward model is really powerful. I think one of the things that, you know, the report talks about and a lot of research talks about is the power of mentors. You know, a lot of the students in this room are going to go off, they're going to enter the workplace, and the question is, one way they can give back, especially if they go into S&T fields, is the next wave that will come after them. What have you guys sort of found when it comes to the really powerful way mentors, especially when they're in the workplace, can play in keeping and building this more robust and equitable pipeline?
Well, I don't think you can overestimate the power of a mentor, of a good mentor. A lot of it's kind of hard to there's not a lot of good research that shows that the formal mentoring really is effective much, because so much about a mentoring relationship is about your individual connection with the person and kind of how somebody who sees you see potential in somebody else, or they see it in you, and then they kind of develop that. And one thing that comes to play there, though, in terms of women, is that we all tend to have implicit biases or unconscious biases that more readily associate math and science with men than with women. I have these biases myself. Many of you probably do as well. There's actually a place you can go online. There's a project called Project Implicit that's run by Harvard, and there's a implicit.harvard.edu has. If you go to that website, there's lots of tests you can take to find out about your own implicit biases, and the gender science implicit association test is one you can take to see kind of, do you more readily associate math and science with men or with women? And what does that do then? What that means is that most of us are more apt to see potential in a man for this kind of scientific or technological success. So that's something that gets in the way for women because people don't tend to judge them as being as capable in these areas. And so one thing I encourage everybody to do is to really look at re-examine their own biases. I can give you an example of how I learned about my own implicit biases. When I worked as an engineer, I was on the phone one day needing some technical information. I worked in the aerospace industry. I was working on satellite design, and I was looking for some technical information about heaters with a heater vendor. And I was on the phone with a woman, and I was under a lot of pressure. I needed this technical information, and I found myself actually thinking, I wish she would just put the man on the phone who can give me the information I need, because she's not going to be able to give it to me. And I just felt that this was something that a man would have. And I noticed it, of course, because I myself was a woman engineer, and yet that's what all the research shows, that it's not just men who have biases this way, but women also have these biases. And so it's something that the first step is to be aware of it. Because when you are putting together a committee or a panel or looking at something, everybody is more apt to think, oh, the people who are really good at this are men. And so to really think, well, wait a second, I'm going to try to get some women on this committee, or and it's not just women, it's any kind of diversity. Because again, there's so much research now that shows that diverse groups produce better results. Diverse boards produce better results for the companies, and the same is true for product design. So really challenging ourselves to make that a priority, to bring in people from all different backgrounds.
That's great. Well, Bita, I think this idea, this was getting talked about in the morning plenary, which is this idea that, especially in the huge growth in micro-lending that's happened, and I think there's a lot of policy that's flowing from this, but the really powerful role that women and girls play in social development, especially in third world countries, because they're more focused on the family, they are much more integrated towards the role of resources. So you have a lot more collectives when it comes to distributed energy, everything else. There's a real power there. What's the intersection you see between that, which is the crux that women and girls are playing in these communities, and the role of science, which is, a lot of times you're actually seeing now the development of new technologies coming out of these collectives. And so when you guys are thinking about your education program, to what extent is that empowerment about, hey, here's coming up with interesting solutions that you may want to deploy in your community? And how do you guys sort of think about that piece, especially when you're sort of engaging in kind of the empowerment spirit?
So I think that for rural areas, especially, and this question of female participation, one of the hardest things is actually access, which is, I think, maybe it's a very basic sort of first step to this question that you're asking. But many times, for example, in rural areas in Colombia, the access that you have, the government has a very good primary education, and the coverage that they have for this primary education sort of extends in a lot of parts of the country. But when it comes to secondary education, people actually have to leave their home areas or their communities to go to the nearby town or the nearby city to have that access to education. So many times what happens is that families decide to send the boy to school. And I mean, you could say, okay, that they're being prejudiced, but part of it is also just reality, the fact that they're afraid that if the sending the girl away by herself to live in the nearby town, what's going to happen, or maybe they need her to help. But there's also a question of sort of worry that, what if we send our children to this by themselves to this nearby town or city, and what's going to happen there. So a lot of times what happens is that when it comes to that point in their lives to continue education, women are also held back in terms of like logistical reasons, if you just want to say it that way. So one of the things that this program has done is that it has focused on the modality, or the way that it is being sort of promoted is around groups, and that these groups are centered in the community themselves, so that people actually don't have to leave where they're living to go somewhere else and to have access to that education, but really to be where they are, to be able to participate in their family life, in their community life, and really not have to sort of become disconnected from their reality. So in that way, I think access, just even access to this education, without it having to be now something that's so far away or so foreign to them, or just so taking them out of sort of where they live, is a crucial and important first step.
That's great. So, we're going to be moving into questions in a little bit, and I think that'll be fun. I think one underlying idea is this idea of grand challenges, right? So when we sort of talk about it, we say, look, there's lots of things in the world, but it's really motivating when you describe clear, audacious goals that you can drive towards, that you can organize your undergraduate experience around. So, for example, part of the folks who sort of think about grand challenges as a powerful concept go back to the space race. The fact that President Kennedy put on the table this idea that we can go to the moon and back. And then in more recent years, you've had companies like IBM say, we can design a computer that can beat a chess champion in or beat Ken Jennings in Jeopardy. What are, I think in global development, there are similar challenges around, how can we develop, key immunizations and vaccines that can have a major impact on maternal and child health? What are ways that we can develop key new agricultural technologies? What are ways that we can build more sustainable areas? What's your sense, Christine, about this idea that one can actually see one's undergraduate experience as a training ground for wanting to go into the world and saying, hey, I think, I can make a real progress on X thing that's out there in the world. So there's a bunch of groups that are like National Academy of Engineering has this Grand Challenges program where they're trying to get students to go out there in the world and pick something that they want to work on. Do you find that like give me your thoughts on how you sort of think about when you enter the world and what kind of challenges you want to tackle?
Yeah, I think that definitely at my school, there's a huge emphasis on how can we use our education to impact the world, but I don't think it's necessarily only when we graduate. I think that you shouldn't really look at it maybe as a training ground. I have to take all these engineering classes so that one day I can do something. It's a combination of that combined with, well, what's going to get me through that? Well, why don't I do stuff while I'm here now? Why don't I do something currently? And we have a program called Duke Engage, which brings students to all over the world to tackle problems. And I'm going to Tanzania with Duke Engage this summer to work on repairing medical equipment in a hospital. And so I think it's more about using the resources. I think that we have so many resources as college students that can really take us to new heights. And if you wait until the end of your college career to say, oh, well, now I'm going to go make an impact, you're going to have missed a lot of these resources. So I think the advice that I would give is, reach out to professors that are working on cool research opportunities or just teaching classes that interest you, even if you're not taking those courses. See how other students are doing different things to impact the community, or just engage in conversations that inspire you to work to these ideals. And I think that if you're doing as much as you can during college, it will only naturally flow that when you graduate and you're out in the workforce or trying to see what you want to do with your life, which is a very frightening question that gets asked a lot. I think that it only will come naturally that, of course, you're going to be doing something that makes an impact in the world. Of course, you're going to be trying to use what you did in college to do something positive, because if you were doing that throughout all your years of college, it'll just continue to flow.
That's great. Well, given that we're in the advice session, Vita, what would, you've got this room full of people who want to organize who are excited about this. What advice would you give as they try to think about what to work on, how to think about, giving back and solving some of these challenges?
That's also a tough one, but I think that one of the things to keep in mind is that many of the things that one does is not about you. I think that sometimes we focus on this idea that what do I need to do, to get ahead, or what do I need to do to sort of make my way in the world, or what is my great idea. But really, if you're interested in change, if you're interested in seeing things happen, it's about how do you help others to do that? How do you help others to really realize their potential? How do you help others have opportunities? How do you, so if we forget a little bit about, this I part, or what am I doing, or how can I do it, and we really focus on helping that other person, I think that things will converge and things will happen. So even though it might seem a little counterintuitive, to forget a little bit about yourself in order to actually continue to advance, I think that would be one piece of advice that I would give.
Well, Christy, I thought your point about diverse teams and just how one thinks about who is your peer group when you go after a problem together, whether it's starting a new company, whether it's designing a new app, whether it's, figuring out like a international mission where you're going to go and help. I think people always kind of pick among their peer group, and it's really powerful to sort of reach out to people that you may not be working with day to day that you think could really help. So when, on the advice side, when students in this room are thinking about who's my team that's going to tackle this problem, how would you sort of recommend going about and thinking about resources on campus or people that they should really be thinking about?
Yeah, well, there are groups for people, for underrepresented minorities in like the Society of Women Engineers, Society of Black Engineers, Society of Hispanic Engineers that are on many campuses. And I would encourage you to look at those groups and see if there are people like that on your campus, groups like that on your campus. And of course, in the age of the internet, we all have so many resources that we didn't have before. So to just reach out and see, even see who are the experts in these fields, who might come from a different background that could be of help to you. I would recommend that. And I think that both Vita and Christine made some really good recommendations as well. I particularly like Christine's idea of not waiting. Because I think there is some good research too that shows that people who make big contributions often work on it for their whole life. They work on the same problem for their whole life. So it's never too early to start, and to really keep it in mind, because if you want to make sure that you're going towards something. Otherwise, you might be going in a direction that's not going to help you in the long run.
That's great. All right. Well, I think we would love to take questions from all of you. I think there are mics going around, so why don't we just have people raise hands? You can either direct it to a particular person on the panel or overall, but that'd be great. Why don't we start with you in the back? So that's a great question. Who wants to take it?
Well, it is a great question, and it's hard because a lot of STEM, capabilities, they build on each other, and so that's why at AUW, and we always encourage people to do as much as they can or as early as they can, because if you get to college and you haven't taken the prerequisites that you need, it's going to be hard to catch up, and so it can be hard to encourage people to do that. And I think that what you have to do then is really talk about what the benefit is of pursuing something in science or in STEM, for somebody who's older, because it's going to be a lot of work, and it might seem like it's not worth it. One thing you can point to is pay. I mean, that's something that is of interest to people, of course, and a lot of people who go back to school later, go back to college later in life, they do go more for, they go into majors that have a clear career path, like nursing, for example, is a popular one. Emphasizing that the benefits in the marketplace to having a STEM career could be one way to get people interested later on.
The other part I'll point out that we focus a lot on is just there's a huge shift into thinking about us as lifelong learners. So if you think about these massive growth of massive online open courses, what they call MOOCs, if you think about all the different ways that people are now finding their ways into science and technology, where people are just taking coding classes as adults and saying, hey, I want to learn this. Mayor Bloomberg took a coding class. I think more and more people are skilling up in this area, partly out of interest, partly out of, saying, hey, what's this next thing? But we want to create lots more on-ramps. And I think one of the principles behind this panel is this just giving back. You can say, learning these skills actually allows me to give back in a really powerful way. Why don't we take more? Yes, you in the back.
Kind of a problem. How do you encourage someone like me? I'm going into medicine, even though it's science and everything, but it's not particularly STEM in the way you think about it. How do you encourage me to keep that dream alive and still work on medicine? Because they're two, even though they're parallel, but I don't know, how do I keep those two together?
Right, it's a great question. How to make all of those hours work. Christine, what do you think?
I mean, I think that a lot of the encouragement can come from seeking encouragement. I think that sometimes I didn't necessarily have encouragement just like given to me. I mean, I had some people who were really outstanding supporters in my life, but especially in college when you're in the midst of it all, I don't have very many female engineering professors, or I don't have a ton of engineering role models. Sometimes it can be about seeking out that encouragement for yourself and, reaching out to people, older students, or reaching out to people just in the world who you see as having careers that you really, look to and aspire to be. And sending them an email, giving them a phone call. People really do, I think, want to engage with students like us and really do, especially if it's a career that's something, rare. If there's someone who is a doctor who's also working on STEM education, that's not very common. If you can Google search and find someone similar to that, that's not common, and you wanting to do that exact same thing could mean that they would definitely want to, talk with you on the phone even, or just exchange a couple emails. And I think that we can take a lot of the initiative ourselves, and especially if you want to do something unique that isn't necessarily handed to you on a silver platter. But some of those experiences can be the ones that are the most impactful and are the most meaningful to your own life too.
Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for being here. I have a question. A lot of the discussion has revolved around getting people to STEM. My question revolves around keeping people who are in STEM into STEM industries. So I'm a mathematics major, and a lot of my peers are using their math background to go into the financial industry, where innovation can likely cause a financial collapse. So my question is, what sort of strategy and tips do you have to keep people who are currently majoring in STEM-related fields in the sort of industries that can grow and innovate about the economy?
No, it's a great question. It's one that both President Clinton and President Obama have talked about, which is, we, have had a large growth in the financial sector, pulling an incredible amount of our greater talent. As we start to build, the American economy happening in the tech industry and in the future in a bunch of different sectors, but pulling students in. We want to give them examples of what they can do in the world and how they can make the world a different, powerful place. And this was something that I've been working hard on, which is people sense of social mission in the workplace really drive a lot of employee satisfaction. But I don't know if you guys had experience on this question of what are the ways when you're graduating and into a career, what are, I certainly think that talk about how you can change the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that we have a job to do ahead of us to really make clear what the social contributions are in these other areas, in the technical areas, because it's not well understood, and it's actually, I was just at Broadcom Corporation just about a month ago, and they really helped their engineers to contribute back. And one of their engineers developed this thing called a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's like a chip basically, but it's only costs $25, and you plug it. Anybody can plug it into a monitor, and they have a computer. And so they're using it. So Broadcom facilitated their employee to just do this basically on his own, provided him the resources he needed, and now it's being distributed all over the world to kids who don't have the resources otherwise. So stories like that, I think, can really bring people to the sectors that they might not think is a way that they can really make a difference and have a really fulfilling career.
All right, let's get one more question. Yes. We can take it. Sure. Okay. We'll stick around after, although I think it's a hard stop and we'll have to go back, but we'll definitely stick around for people who want. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Erica Sabraski. I'm a grad student here, and along with these wonderful people, I run the Young Science program here. And so in our field, we're in the biological sciences. Women are not as rare as they used to be. The underrepresented minority populations are actually still very rare in our discipline. And that really limits the ideas and the viewpoints that we can have in our discipline. And so our program actually targets these populations. And we're interested in, I'm curious about how you guys think that we can better reach and connect with these students, and also overcome biases, both external and internal, to the student self on that.
And just to turn it around, what do you think your strategy, what's been working about?
I think for our strategies, one thing, it's difficult because we work in the St. Louis public schools. Most of the scientists are not from underrepresented populations, and most of the students are. And the district is very resource poor, and so one of the ways we approach this is trying to give resources, both volunteer resources, scientists, and equipment and supplies. And so I think just by being there and being in the schools and showing people that we are scientists, you can do this, here's an experiment, you just did it successfully. If you can be a scientist, that's the approach that we take. But I don't know, I mean, if you have other recommendations, we'd be happy.
Great. I think we're basically done with time, but why don't we just give a last chance for comment?
Can I quickly just say, I just want to encourage you to take a look at AUW's report, Why So Few, and you can get it if you just Google that online. But we have a chapter on colleges and universities and how to recruit more women, and actually what we point to are historically black colleges and universities who've done a really good job of recruiting women, and obviously underrepresented minorities as well. But we talk about research in there that talks about the specific techniques that they do, that they use, and even in your case, maybe connecting with them individually. Some of these universities individually might be helpful because some of them have done a really good job.
Well, I want to thank our very distinguished panel for their great comments and all of you for your time. Thanks so much. Well, thanks everyone. Can everyone hear me? Well, thanks everyone. I was able to sit in on one table. It seems like you guys have a great conversation. What we'll do right now is just give folks a chance to report back. A couple of key themes that really jumped out based on three questions. Let's see hands from the table, and we'll start calling. Just give like a sense of what was the themes that we heard, with an idea, anything that sort of really jumped out. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Our table was talking diversity. So it's not in the question, but that was one of the big takeaways. So you mentioned, Christiane, about the better results, but also we mentioned as role models. So if you see like a STEM, someone in the STEM field that is diverse, and it's probably someone And it was mentioned, how about people that are not socially minded? Then maybe you can even brand them, well, you need the skills when you graduate, you get a job. So these are good opportunities for you. So even those people, when you say, well, I don't have a STEM field, well, what matters is that you're passionate about making a difference. So, for example, Nathan was talking that out of 10 mentors, only 2 are related to computer science. The other people just were so passionate that over the summer, they learned the skills, they teach others, and then at the end of the program, they actually decided to go and pursue education. So they have a meaningful impact. And again, the takeaway is diversity, and also to be passionate about helping others.
That's great. All right, we're going to have to be back. So why don't you do it before? Back there. I think we just came up with a solution. Our table believes STEM needs to be sexy. One, STEM needs a PR person, which kind of captures the diversity aspect of bringing other people into STEM and expanding the definition of STEM. But also, someone mentioned we need to face reality, right? Apple jobs are all going to China because they have the population. So we need to increase that in the US to better suit the needs of STEM. Thank you. Great. All right. Why don't we do right there?
All right. Our table couldn't agree more. STEM absolutely needs to be sexy. One of the things we talked about was exposure and mentorship and this idea of the civic scientist. This is something that Neil Lane, Clinton's former science advisor, actually talked about. The idea of the scientist taking it upon himself to contextualize instead of obfuscate the work that he or she does, communicating science beyond their lab, their institution, immediately to the public. And something that's worked well with my commitment and some other tutoring commitments as well is taking these scientists from our own universities and bringing them to youth, especially underrepresented youth, and giving them the exposure, helping them transcend the textbook, the classroom, their life situations, and actually see what science can be like, see the sexiness, see the projects, see the pay, see all these different factors, and then realize that they can do it.
Great. I just great. Oh, why don't we start there? Yes.
Hello, my name is Jill Isaac, and I'm also the first girl to speak here. So, to be quick, simply is that we feel like my takeaway is one of the ways we can address it would be to incorporate science classes into our core curriculum in college classes. For example, how many of you here has a computer science class as a mandatory class on campus? My class, my school doesn't. And we feel like a way to do that would be lessening the amount of history classes and taking more like computer science classes or potentially making biology mandatory if you are serious about having this membership.
So our table talked a lot about something mentioned in the discussion, embracing the struggle. So our table's from different universities, and we talked a lot about how we had so many things in common, you know, being up till wee hours of the morning working on problem sets, or disappearing into the computer lab for a week, or taking too many exams. And, you know, there was a moment that we believe, you know, every person pursuing a STEM field will fail. And it's how they respond to that failure that really makes a difference. And at least in my experience, I've noticed higher dropout rates among female engineers as well, which touched upon a lot of the topics before. And I guess one thing that we were struggling with is how you can ensure that you know, people respond in a positive manner to that failure. And sort of, if all of these engineering schools across the country are experiencing such similar things, how can you connect that to make a motivating basis? So.
More failures on yes. Yes.
All right. So we talked mainly about integration of identity. So we honed in on the diversity aspects, how to get underrepresented populations into STEM areas. So we talked about integrating identity into what they're learning or teaching. So really, if they're passionate about something like dance or arts and crafts, poetry, how, you know, challenging them to use that interest to focus on the STEM area. You know, how can they use that passion and really teach health and physiology, or teach engineering, you know, using that creativity.
Everybody at my table must have.
Hi there, my name is Joshi. So what we tried to address was how to empower communities instead of just developing solutions for them. And so we actually had two groups here, and I'm trying to work on clean food stores, and we also have a group here that works on wind energy for developing for villages in Guatemala. And what we realized is you can have the greatest technology in the world, you can't just give it to them. And I guess one of the issues is that STEM education has a direct impact on efficacy of how successful our technology is, probably because if people don't understand the problem, they won't necessarily know how to use it, so they become self-dependent and they won't be self-reliant, and our technology just won't be successful. So people really need to understand what the problem is, and we can do that by giving actual physical examples, maybe by demonstrating, for example, at least lung disease. It's really difficult to communicate that. If you can actually give physical demonstrations, explain these concepts, this will kind of have a ripple effect by also empowering women or actually the primary resource.
One more, go back. One more woman. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Hyobin Tam from the University of Maryland. Our table talked about first wanting that we believe that it should start earlier. So we think middle school actually is still too late. I mainly work with elementary students in Washington, D.C. area. And by the first, second grade, they've already established who they are, their identities, or at least they think they do. So starting early was one of our ideas. And personally, I feel like we need to really incorporate physical activity into them realizing that our bodies are also connected to the STEM education. So I work a lot on taking my students outside and giving them strategic games to work on, like building certain structures or building certain things and giving them not too much structure, but leaving it up to them to like work as a team. And that was one of the things that we wanted to emphasize.
Great,
Thank you.
awesome. All right, we're going to finish this up with just a quick final thing from our awesome panel. Why don't we start with Christina and work our way up?
I guess
What message would you leave the students here about next year?
I guess I would just like to thank everyone for being here and let you all know that by all of you being here and talking to me and seeing all of what your ideas are and your commitments are, it really motivates me and it makes me really excited for all the different things that are going to occur if we have all these bright young minds here, what we can accomplish if we all work together and support each other. So I want to say thank you.
I think I would just say good luck, keep going, and really I'm sure that out of this room, like if everybody is thinking about these ideas, something great will emerge, so really just keep going.
And I just want to share a couple books that I think might be helpful for people because it seemed like the diversity part resonated with a lot of people. There's a book called The Difference by Scott Page about how diversity makes better results. And there's another book by Carol Dweck called Mindset, and that's about developing a growth mindset. To these guys' points about how everybody in a STEM major is going to run into a point where they feel like they're going to fail and they need to have this persistence. So Mindset has a path to developing a growth mindset for everybody. And then, of course, AUW's Why So Few is something. It's at auw.org. I encourage you to read it.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. This was awesome. You guys are doing awesome work, and we really appreciate it. I'll just say that I never think that the best idea comes from somebody else or from people older than you. Again and again, history is just full of the best companies, the best nonprofits, and the best ideas coming from students who are looking to change the world. So it'll be happening in rooms like this. So thanks, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen.